Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Gambit. And this is a quick time lapse, or not, excuse me, a quick real time portion, just to kind of show the changes I've made and some of the things that I've done. So here you're looking at an overhead shot. I didn't really change any way of entering the ride yet because I just wanted to keep it connected to the entrance for now. And the majority of changes took place right where the station is. But first, let's go to my sketches and I'll show you. So you'll see right here, in this sketch is the station. So the top left, that whole giant building is the station. And you can see up in the top right where I've scratched out some sketches because I've changed how you go into the queue. Originally, the main queue would come out right there and then turn and curve around to the right and go down to the main entrance plaza on the lower right hand side of the page. But now you can see on the lower right hand side of the page, the guests will walk up a hill, they'll see the sign, fountain, or something with Gambit, they'll see the station right behind it. To the left will be restrooms and lockers. The gift shop will be beneath the station, that's where the guests exit from the ride. And then as they keep walking to the right, they'll see some planters and some steps that can go up to the bridge that goes over the ride, or they could turn to the right, and between the bridge and the entrance, which is that little dark line you see, there's an ADA ramp. It'll go up just so wheelchairs can go around the stairs. But the main entrance you'll see is on the right hand side. Guests will walk into it, and then there'll be a path that veers off to the left for quick queue access. Now that quick queue will go into the station where originally I had the path coming out, up on the top right hand side where it's a bit scratched out. But now I have that as the quick queue, and the main queue will instead, you'll see here, the main queue will go underneath the track. It'll turn to the left, go under the track, and then out the other side. And here's another quick shot of that. So you'll see the guests will walk in from the right hand side, they'll walk under the track, and then right here in that corner as they pass under the track is where the quick queue will meet the main queue. Then all the guests will turn right and go up the stairs and into the station. The main thing I was trying to do was have more guest queue ride interaction, because there just wasn't enough with my main idea. And also, you don't want to get ready to get in line for a ride, look ahead and see the amount of cattle pens that you'll have to wade through, and you don't want to see that. When you get into a line for a ride, you don't want to know how long the wait is. You want to just experience the queue and have something to look at. So you'll see right here, this is what I've done. So the guests will walk in from the park, across a bridge on the lower right, going across a river. This river is at the bottom of two valleys. The coaster will sit on the left-hand side of the valley against the side of the mountain, kind of like Thunderhead and Dollywood, which Thunderhead is mostly in the middle of the valley of two hills, whereas this one is on one side of the valley. The guests will cross a wooden bridge and then go around the bottom of the hill. The path can keep on going out that way to another section of the park, but the path will then veer off on the right hand side, going up into the main ride plaza where you'll see the bathrooms on the left, the lockers, the ride sign in front of you, the ride entrance on the right, and the station behind it. So you'll see the guests walk into the queue. They either go to quick queue or keep staying in the main queue. The main queue will have a wooden bridge that goes over a creek that comes from the top of the mountain. And then there'll be a series of one main queue, but there'll be a few cattle pens. Now I'm not going to have the cattle pens in use. I'll go ahead and build them, but I won't actually have guests walking through them because they won't be needed. But realistically, a park of this size with a new coaster like this would want to have that much cattle pen. So I have two separate cattle pens. The design and location may vary, and I may even change it to where there's no cattle pens at all. It's just extra paths that look like nature paths that act as a cattle pen. And so after they go past those cattle pens, the queue is slowly going uphill. You'll see on the left-hand corner, the top left-hand corner, I have a building. And this area is where the track kind of goes over and under itself a couple of times. I really wanted to have the queue interact with it, but I wasn't sure how to do it. So you see that building has two different towers, and it looks kind of strange from overhead. But here's the sort of the area that I'm working at, you'll see the track goes over one section of track twice. So it'll go over it and under it. So on the left-hand side of the screen is where the guests are coming in. They'll go into this building, and you'll see here kind of a better idea of what I'm going for. The guests will go up some stairs into the building, walking to the left. Then they'll go out of a tower and out the other side, going on a bridge over a creek, following a little bit of a queue, and then down to beneath the next portion of track. It's kind of hard for me to show you, but you can kind of see what I've got going on here. And then here's this one sketch of the building that I tried to do. I was trying to I didn't want it to look like a giant structure. I wanted it to look more like a shed, but keeping the same architecture as the station. And so that's what I've tried to achieve here. And here's another angle of that, just the staircase. That's not the final position. That was just I just hit the path there to make sure that, hey, will this meet clearance or not? And it does. It meets clearance barely, but it does meet the clearance, because that was my main concern. Here is the sort of finalized sort of structure of the building itself that I'm going for. I'm going to build it similar to how I built the station, using the beams first and then putting the scenery on afterward. So you'll see the you can see a side profile of the track that goes down and then around. The path will follow that up. It'll go underneath the other two sections of track and then out the other side with the tower. So it's a very simple design, but it took me a while to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. And after that, let's go back real quick. After this, the guests will go out the tower and then they'll follow around. So on top of the hill, there's the track that goes around. The queue comes out from under the track, and then there's this nice curve with a cliff beneath. This curve will actually be a giant water structure. The water, it's like a waterfall cascading down to where the track goes down the dip here. This water is fed by a creek that comes out from underneath the top of the lift hill. So it's like a creek that will flow down the side. And then that all cascades down here beneath the queue, and then beneath this track. And here is another sketch I did showing that, where the track down here with the dip, there'll be a series of fountains that'll go off. I'll use a sequencer for that. And then all that water collects, meets up to the creek, which then joins the main river between the valleys. So that's what I spent time working on, and then I sort of went back in to change it. And yeah, so I guess that's it. And now we're just going to go ahead and get into the real time lapse, the real time lapse portion. So if you don't want to see the time lapse, just skip to the end and you'll see the cinematics. But you may want to stay, because I'm going to be joined by a very special guest today. So see you in a minute. Alright, welcome back everyone to another episode of Gambit, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Silvarret, the man who built this
Hey everybody!
thing.
Yeah, that's basically... Well, I built this thing, but I need to add some nuance to that. I started this thing, but you've taken it to a whole nother level. Like, you really own it by now, I think.
Yeah.
So,
the only changes I made were basically the bottom of the lift all the way to where where the train is coming up out of that hill. I lowered that hill some more so it would decrease the speed of the train going by the station. Because it was,
right.
If I didn't, it was going way too fast. And if I slowed the friction down even more, it would make it over some of the other hills. I think I wound up using 0.7 friction, I think, or 0.8. I don't remember.
I think that makes sense, yeah. I mean, for me, it's always felt like 0.7 is a little bit, like, not quite enough friction, but 0.8 definitely slows down quite quickly.
Yeah, and I found that 0.6 was a bit too much when you looked at it from off the ride. So this hill, I lowered it down, and then I basically deleted everything from here all the way to the lift. Because I wanted to add 3 trains in the pre-lift section and a longer brake run to help slow the train down better. So right here, I'm placing the. I try to keep everything organized when I build. So all these lateral beams are in one single building. That way, if I need to change something, I'm not selecting thousands of objects. I can just open up one building and change that one piece. So all these lateral beams are the double beams are in one single building. and then the let's see, the vertical beams that connect to them are also in the same building.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's super good. I always do that myself as well.
And all of the footings are in their own building as well. And I think each footing is 8 pieces. I used I have all the DLCs except for Magnificent Rides because I just don't need that right now. Now, if they had Doom Buggies in that pack, I would have been all over it. But the rides they had, I just don't see a use for them right now because I don't build parks.
Yeah, right.
Not yet, at least. Oh, I don't know what to
Yeah,
talk
and
about.
with the level of detail that you're getting into with Gambit, I don't know how much more time it's gonna take to actually finish this, because that's the one thing that I've always thought is absolutely insane about your build of Gambit. You know, I know you've pointed this out in, I think, the first episode of your series on this as well, but you know, I basically abandoned this project because I built it just before they added the friction slider. So the layout was actually kind of built to try and keep that in mind, and no, that was part of the reason, for sure. I realized that they changed the game and I wasn't really happy with this layout because it was obviously very constrained due to the limitations that we had at the time. But also, I tried to start supporting this thing and I enlisted the help of Free the Bear as well, who basically started supporting the first turn, and at that point we were both like, yeah, no, this is too much effort.
I appreciate the work that he did, but I ended up deleting it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it looked good, but I just ended up deleting it because there's a certain way I wanted to build everything, and I didn't want to have to go back in and change it. It was just easier for me to go in and just redo it. But with the, you mentioned the terrain conforming track, I'm keeping that in mind. So in one of the sketches you sent, that third one, there's a river. So I'm picturing this park kind of like Dollywood in the Smoky Mountains, where there's basically 3 different valleys inside that park. And it's really hard to actually see the outside of the park, or where the, I guess the perimeter fence is. So, like with Silverback, you have the perimeter fence right there behind the lift hill, and it's very defined. Whereas something like Dollywood, you really have to try to hunt for that property line. You cannot see it. So, Thunderhead at Dollywood is what I'm basing this off of. It's right along the back edge of the property, and it's, well, not anymore because now they've just expanded the park with Wildwood Grove. But Thunderhead sits in the middle of a valley, but that's a small valley. So Gambit, I have on one side of a valley with a river running down the middle, and then the other half of the valley would be either more of the park or just maybe some cabins or something for the guests to stay in. So the whole architecture of the buildings I'm going for, if you look at Wild Eagle at Dollywood, I'm basically copying that exact same architecture, at least the framing of the building.
Yeah, I think that's actually really cool and interesting, partly also because, I mean, I like that style, I'm very familiar with it, and I think Dollywood is a really beautiful park. I can definitely see some Thunderhead in this coaster, although it's kind of funny because when I was building this, it was mostly inspired by Wood Coaster in Night Valley, China.
I looked mostly at that one. That one, the newer GCIs is what I'm focusing the woodwork on. I'm not using Thunderhead for the structure because that's like 13 years ago, I think. I'm using new GCIs for how their structuring is. And you mentioned, I think in the first episode of the Silverback coaster, that someone sent you a photo of some decorative wood. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what it looks like.
I'm gonna have to dig up that comment, I think. But yeah, it was this really interesting picture where basically between 2 diagonal beams that were on the inside of a curve. So, you know, these diagonal beams going down all the way from the ground up to where the track is.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There were just horizontal planks placed on these supports. But not even like in a support sense. They were just hammered onto the supports.
Oh yeah, Thunderhead has a whole bunch of those.
Yeah, what would be the reason behind those planks there?
Let me pull up a picture of Thunderhead actually. Hopefully my Wi-Fi won't kill me.
I mean, maybe it's a rudimentary kind of ladder structure. I have no idea.
It's I don't know. Okay, yeah, the internet's not gonna work. Let's see. Thunderhead. Because roller coaster.
Yeah, because they were suggesting that it would be a decorative function, and I don't know, maybe it is, but I was a bit unsure about that, because for one, it doesn't really look like decoration. It's just really a bunch of blanks on different blanks. I don't know. It doesn't really seem to be part of any scenery or theming in that sense. But I'm sure it's also not random. There must be some kind of reason behind it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it is. That would be a Adam House question. I don't know him personally, but I have met him before. But like with let's see, I think who built Thunder Road? Rest in peace, Thunder Road. Philadelphia Toboggan Company. I don't think I don't know. Thunderhead at Carowinds it didn't have the beams in the middle of the turn. It had cables, but I think a lot of newer GCIs like Gold Striker at California's Great America, the beams that are in the middle of the curve are just long beams with horizontal beams in the middle. So I have no idea what that person is talking about.
Yeah, I should look up where the comment was, because I'm not even sure which video it was anymore, but somebody somewhere left a comment with a link to the picture. But also, I have to say, outside of this picture, I couldn't find any other cases of it either.
Yeah, I tried looking as well. I looked up every GCI I could think of, and I just didn't know.
Yeah, no, I couldn't find anything, so... Yeah, it's really confusing.
So right here, I encountered an issue. I didn't realize that you couldn't get rid of the cross ties. So, the structure of a GCI, when you look at it overhead, the width between the footings doesn't really change that much unless the track is really banked. So I was trying to figure out how to keep that, because that's a straight section of track, even though the track is banked. So I was trying to figure out how to align the beams to where the structure would realistically match what GCI would do. So there will be a few cases where the cross beam will clip through the lateral brace beam, but there's not much I can do about that.
Right.
Because in some cases, the cross tie won't be 90 degrees between the track. It'll be angled in certain. It's hard to explain what I'm talking about.
Really, it does that?
Yeah, take a look at
Mystic. 90 degrees.
Take a look at Mystic Timbers. So on Mystic Timbers, if you look between the lateral beams, you'll see that some of the cross ties are not 90 degrees with the track.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. No, I've never noticed that.
Because remember, they build it as they go. So they'll put up the vent, and then they'll place the cross ties, and then they'll place the track on top.
Yeah, right.
So it's not like a prefab Intamin Woody where it's all prefabricated.
Yeah, exactly.
But
here, it's not like it's ever off very much, like maybe just a few degrees or so.
Yeah, sometimes it's up to 15 degrees or more, especially on a very steep drop. If you look at Mystic Timber's first drop, you'll see it. That's probably one of the best examples I can think of. That or Gold Striker, but Gold Striker's first drop is in a tunnel.
That's interesting.
The first thing I wanted to do was just to make sure I got all these beams placed, because then I'll go back in and rotate them 90 degrees to make the vertical beams. I find this very relaxing. I don't know why.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Kind of being a very therapeutic thing to do. Because it's also, I don't know, it's kind of mindless. Like, you have to set a certain job for yourself, but then you're just following the track along and doing a certain pretty similar action every single time.
Yeah. And I think, so I read something on Bro Nation today about if you make something with the toolkit, and then you as a creator go in and delete it, it'll delete it off of everyone's computer. Like in SimCities. So if you have an item that you love, make sure you message that creator and let them know don't delete it. Because if they delete it, you'll lose it.
Yeah, it's quite extreme.
And if you use one beam for your entire coaster and that creator deletes it, well, I guess your coaster doesn't have supports anymore.
Oh my god.
So
there's no way to back up other people's creations?
I don't know. I'm hoping that there is a failsafe, because I have a beam that I'm going to use for the cross tie, or for the catwalks, and that's going to be a couple thousand, if not 10,000 beams or more. So if that creator were to delete it, there would be no catwalk.
Yeah, right.
So
although then again, I mean, why would somebody delete something? I'm not sure. It's definitely a risk, but I don't know to what extent there's really a precedent for this.
I think Frontier is just trying to weed out all of the creations that are not really needed, I think.
Yeah,
I
right.
guess that's a nice way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh god.
I mean, I have to say, in general, the whole like theme park toolkit has kind of panned out slightly different from what I expected beforehand. It's been a lot of very separate objects, and well, I come mostly from a background of Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, where custom scenery is the thing that mostly kept the game alive. But this was very indexed, you know, everybody made sets and put certain types of pieces into the same set. And this was very conducive, I think, to everybody trying to make packs of different pieces that together would form things. I don't see that as much in the theme makers toolkits in Planet Coaster. You know, you see most people building separate objects and certain one-use and even kind of niche objects. You know, the most popular ones will be animatronics of animals, or well, if you're Rudy, some kind of wheelchairs or things like that. But you never really get into these object
wheelchair
sets. Yeah.
I don't know how big how big was that file even, because I know it was huge.
I don't remember. I never actually checked it out. I never needed a wheelchair for myself.
Damn, it looked
but
nice,
I've heard
though.
about this.
It looked really nice.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, for
so
sure.
in my other park, I have a few videos on it, but with Happily Ever After, there's only one Theme Maker's Toolkit item in that park, and it's the statue of Walt and Mickey. That's the only Theme Maker Toolkit item in that park, because I was just scared, you know, if I get a bunch of these things in the park, will it lag the game?
Yeah, right.
Turns out it wasn't even the items, it was the spotlights behind the castle that were lagging my game.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that's an important aspect of the show, and there's like 200 spotlights so far.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I wish Frontier would do, is give us a light that we could program ourselves instead of needing a couple hundred lights for one show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a totally valid idea. And I mean, how much experience do you have with Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 actually?
Basically ever since it came out. I was a
Okay, yeah,
child.
because
I don't
then
know
you
how old I
remember
was,
also, yeah, the
Mixmaster.
general like Mixmaster that we had in that game.
Now, I never got to work much with it because I was more into building like buildings and stuff in that game, so I never got to program with fireworks or the lights, but I've seen some creations that people have done with that, and oh my goodness, you know, we need something like that in this game. But
yeah, it's amazing. Like I recently went back to watch some of the old fireworks shows from Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and it's like, to this day, some of the best fireworks simulations that I've ever seen in a video game. Like, it's really been hard to even top it. Like, the way that the Mixmaster in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 gave you complete control over the timing and placement and every kind of animation is absurd. It was super cool. And I mean, I could see why they didn't per se put it in Planet Coaster. I think even in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 it was kind of an afterthought and kind of a cheat thing, but it created this whole new part of the game, and it created a new part of the community even. You know, there was a part of the community entirely dedicated to fireworks shows, water shows, laser shows, all of these effects and like the time Mixmaster things. So, you know, that was a really cool and interesting part of the game, and Planet Coaster has sort of touched upon this, but never really gone as much in depth as Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 did.
I remember when Frontier first gave us the sequencer, and trying to get that to work right was a pain. Because I had started Haunted Mansion, and trying to get that to do what I wanted was just a challenge. But so right here is where I'm going to start aligning these beams. So I keep one horizontal beam, and I copy it, and then I oh gosh, the camera's moving so much.
I mean, it has to, right?
Yeah, I angle a beam between the cross ties to get it about as good as I can. And then I double it, because the beams that are connected directly to the track, or the lateral beams, are double the size. From what I've noticed. And then
I was about to say, I'm not an expert, but from what I've seen so far, this looks really real.
And so that's what I'm doing here. And on beams that are like less than, let's say, 10 degrees, there is no need for a secondary horizontal beam beneath it. Because the one beam is enough to support that section of track.
Right. Yeah, this is super good. Also, I think it's interesting to note how you built the beams next to each other instead of clipping straight through each other. That's a good eye to detail.
Yeah, I had to look and figure out. So I was confused as to which side the vertical beam was connected to, and I think I've got it right where it's behind the beam, like in the direction of travel. Now, what's weird is, so the angled beam where it meets the horizontal beam, there's actually a metal plate where they both connect, but I can't really do that, so I have to clip it through. But normally where the angled beam meets the horizontal beam, there's two metal plates on either side, and they cut the beam and just bolt it together with the plate.
Huh.
But on this one, you're going to see the angled beam go through the bottom of the horizontal beam in most cases.
Yeah, right.
Because it's just not worth trying to do that. So
it's yeah, I can totally see that. It's a lot of effort also for a very minor detail. Not to say that there's anything wrong with this. This is already insanely detailed the way that you're doing it at the moment, but I think it would just not be worth it.
No, it's not really worth it because you're not really going to notice it. I even thought about putting bolts on everything, but that's just not worth it. So, I mean,
and it's going to kill the piece counts, might even lag up the park eventually.
It could, yeah, and I may even add a couple of flat rides. I'm not sure yet because I just watched your Jaegerhorn. So I was like, I could probably add a flat ride or two. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, maybe some kind of paths around the area to give it some sort of setting. Although that said, I mean, the main inspiration for this was Wood Coaster in Night Valley, which is also kind of a kind of coaster that sits in its own little setting without much of a theme park around it. It's, at least as far as I can see, it's mostly just forest around it, and then the rest of the valley, the rest of the park in the middle of this valley is a little bit further away from it.
Yeah. So I'm still not sure what I'll do, but I know the coaster itself will mostly be surrounded by trees.
Yeah.
And then the queue will so down here, beneath that path above, it's like a waterfall cascading down, and that waterfall is fed by a creek up behind the lift hill. And then as the coaster comes down this curve, I'll have some fountains shooting up, and then that water will feed into the main river that's in the middle of the valley.
Sounds good.
It's hard to describe it with words.
Yeah, it's gonna also be hard to build. I mean, working with animated water and Planet Coaster, I don't know. I have to admit, it can be really difficult to make it work with the textures.
I haven't tried it yet, but I'm willing to try it.
Right. I just a fair warning because especially because the water, of course, is just volumetric. Like you can just fill spaces, and you can't really build waterfalls unless you're using particle effects. But then, I don't know, I've always had an issue with using particle effects. Not to say that there's anything wrong with them per se, although they don't respond to light, of course.
That's something I struggle with.
So depending on how it's built, it can look really strange and out of place.
That's something I struggled with in Haunted Mansion because there's a lot of fog, and even the cobwebs I've noticed don't respond to light that well.
Yeah.
So
it's always quite difficult to make that work. Although a creek could of course be made with a rapids ride, and then terraforming around that, of course.
Of course, the creek is also very, very close to paths, so I'm not sure, given the game's limitations and hitboxes that are abnormally large, don't know if it'll let me. So I'll have to play around with it. Like up there where I'm going to have the shed where the track is over and under itself, off camera I placed a path to make sure, was it going to be clearance? And to be honest, what you built actually barely meets clearance.
Yeah.
Just barely.
I can see that.
Because I was putting in the the iron beams beneath the track where it goes over another part of the track later, and I had to adjust it in a weird way because if you were to put your hands up, you would have touched it.
Oh god. Yeah, I did check clearance on everything, but I definitely remember it being very tight in certain spaces, and of course I wasn't keeping in mind how it would have been supported in hindsight.
Which I figured it out, so that's the last thing I do in this episode is building the iron structure or the metal ironwork that supports the track overhead. So I don't know.
Oh yeah, and coming back to what you talked about earlier about the angle of the beams and it being different from the cross ties between the rails, you can actually really see it on this curve.
Well, the cross ties in the game are programmed to be 90 degrees with the track at that particular spot.
Yeah.
So I wish I could change it or get rid of cross ties entirely, but you know, Planko is Planko.
Yeah. I mean, I also have to say, I really applaud the attention to detail, but, you know, you can hide some things with camera angles for off-ride shots, and when you're on the ride, it's actually really hard to tell exactly how angled the cross ties will be on the rails.
Yeah.
So I don't think it'll make it look unrealistic in any way.
And then one more thing I'm going to do, so if you've seen a new GCI and you've seen just how black the rails are, I'm gonna put my own rail cover over the rails.
Oh wow!
It'll be I did it in the station. Let me see if I have a screenshot of it.
So you're really just covering the steel that the wheels are gonna ride on. All right, yeah.
Screenshots. I don't remember.
So
when I did it.
I don't know. That'll be a bit wider than what kind of piece do you want to use for that?
They are Theme Maker's Toolkit pieces.
Ah, yeah, of course.
They're like half-meter beams. And it looks really good. The only thing is,
wow.
The only thing is they don't reflect light that well. So they won't be shiny or anything.
Right.
Let's see, was that the only one I had?
Yeah, that is true. It does look, in terms of reflection, it does look a bit strange.
Yeah. But when you're riding it, it looks fantastic. So that's something I may do off camera.
Right. And there's also extra metal on the side then.
Yeah, there's. They have a little metal rail on the top, side, and bottom.
Right.
I think I had another screenshot. Was it this one? I think so.
Yeah, I think it looks quite good.
Of course, this was a while ago. My janitor's just standing there doing nothing. So, as I got up to this portion of the ride, I realized that I needed to go ahead and make sure the clearance was right. But I went off camera, I stopped recording, went off camera, and went back in, because a lot of the turns that are really highly banked, the lateral beam sticks out a lot farther. So I went back in and doubled up that, so it would look a bit more realistic. I looked at Gold Striker for that, because on the turn now that goes downhill, you can see that the beams stick out a lot farther. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure that I fixed as well, because then I can make the catwalk a little bit wider and make the clearance better.
Yeah, I was wondering about that as well. How much have you experimented with the catwalk yet?
I haven't done anything with the catwalk yet, but I have an idea of what I want to do, because I'm even going to have. I noticed that newer GCIs tend to have wood in the middle of the cross ties as well. It's like two beams that follow most of the length of the track.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that as well. I think I'm going to use the curbs for that, actually.
Yeah, it makes sense. I've seen people try that already in Planet Coaster, I think, but then usually people, so far, everybody I've seen do that has used the 1 meter small wooden pillar pieces.
Oh,
but yeah. Like, you could go for that. But even smaller pieces would definitely follow along the track better, because even with that 1 meter piece, you can see it move kind of strange in the curves. Although in real life it kind of does as well.
Yeah, in real life they are
you can
straight
see
beams of wood.
You can see the transitions between the straight blank pieces there.
Yeah, I had to look real close, but they are straight pieces of wood. Even the catwalks are straight beams of wood. In some cases, they will cut them as a curve to fit, but they usually don't. They'll usually just cut the beams straight. The only ones that they will cut are the ones that are right there next to the rails. They will cut those to make them fit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I went ahead and downloaded a proxy from a toolkit item that I'm going to use use on the coaster itself as well.
For what exactly?
The proxy sensors for the blocking systems.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, there's only a few of them. I think I'm only going to need a few.
Is it an actual GCI one?
GCI uses the same one that B&M uses.
Oh, wow.
hmm
Well, that's new knowledge.
Yeah, a lot of coaster manufacturers will use the same proxy systems, especially if Andre Engineering is the one programming your ride. A lot of them they'll use the same proxy switches. This I-beam is a TMTK item, and it's about the right size for what I'm doing here. This I really had to play with because, again, it really did not meet clearance at first. So I had to look at in real life how they're actually attached to the wood, and then go back in and change it to make it meet clearance, because I didn't want to change the track.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that mess.
It's alright. Well, I don't feel like smoothing anything again, so I just didn't want to adjust it.
Yeah, God, it's even with the 4-meter method allowing you to get decently smooth coasters in Planet Coaster, going back and changing parts of the layout is just...
Yeah, there's one part of Fury 325 where it's... After the first drop and going into the first turn, there's a little clip right there where the camera is. I'm not going to go change it, so... Right here I paused the game just so I could test the clearance. It's very, very close.
Yeah.
But it's also a great head chopper, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act, for sure.
I
do have to say
guests a few times.
Yeah, right. And they really almost touch the beams, or what?
Yeah. I also had to open it to guests because when I was redoing the station area and I had a bridge going over the track, I really needed to make sure that first the bridge met ADA requirements, so no more than 4.5 degrees in slope, and also no more than 30 feet long. And then I also had to make sure that the coaster itself met clearance beneath it. So it did. I had to adjust the path a little bit, but it worked. So, and then I wanted to test to see how the guests reacted to the lift hill and to the brake run, because they tend to get bored when they sit on the lift hill or sit on the brake run, and
just a bit annoying. I'm not sure to what extent that's still the case, but I remember it being the case for quite a while that if you had, a slower part in a ride, no matter how intense the rest of the ride would be, it would just drag down the overall excitement.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's still a thing or not, but...
Yeah, I don't know either.
I
do have to say, though, I think this metal beam actually looks quite good. The only times I've done this kind of metal beam for the overpasses is using the in-game beams, the in-game H-beam, but it actually doesn't look quite as fitting as this one does.
Yeah, so this I-beam and a lot of the small metal beams that I use in the station, they have a very, very small file size. It's like the station structure is all toolkit items. Yeah, there's Walt Mickey. So here is another... This is another team.
What's this?
It's a toolkit item. So it's really hard to see unless you pause the video, but these horizontal beams are connected by small L beams. So in real life, these would be little tiny L beams, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to use a single beam between it. So there's like a few horizontal beams and then one diagonal beam between each one.
Oh, that's something I've actually never noticed before. Where do you even find some of these beams and these toolkit items?
It was on Bronation, actually. Someone had posted a link to them a while back, and I had to scroll to find it, but I finally found the guy that makes this stuff. So I don't know if he did these I-beams or not, but these are very small file sizes, so if you need to use them, they're there. So.
And they're pretty much safe to use, I guess.
Yeah, as long as the creator doesn't delete them.
Yeah, right. Are they specifically made for use in coasters as well, or just a general kind of thing?
Just a general kind of thing. And then there's one guy on the Bro Nation Discord that made a lumber kit, like how wood houses are framed. So, but that's all the time lapse that I have, and this is what I had finished on. So, and the next time lapse, I'm gonna continue with the supports on the other piece of track behind it, and do the same thing with the beams, the metal beams, get that put in. And then I think I'm going to finish putting in the cross beams on the track. And then I really want to start on the building that's going to go over this area. So
Right.
it's a slow process.
Yeah, it's definitely a very slow process, but you know, going into this kind of level of detail just takes a lot of time.
And then off camera after this, I went ahead and built up the mountains behind the lift hill, trying my attempt at making forced perspective mountains.
Ooh.
So
I do think they are. I mean, if I could give my 2 cents here, I do think they are natural mountains. So I think to some extent they should probably remain, you know, believably unlandscaped.
Yeah. I'm still not sure where I want the maintenance road because the transfer is up on the top left, that hill. The transfer is basically beneath that, on the other side of the cliff.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where I want the maintenance road and where I want the park barrier to be. Because this coaster is sort of off in the back of the park. And there's nothing else back there. It's like a dead end. So I'm not really sure where I want it to be. So I may end up putting in some cabins on the opposite side of the valley.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
I may even just send it to you and have you do that. Well, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm down. I'd be down to go for one more episode. But when it comes to supporting the coaster and adding the actual coaster elements and details, I do have to say I don't think I can really help you much there. You're way better at this than I am, and it's just been really cool to watch this coaster get dressed up, so to speak.
Yeah, I do have to say though, I think in terms of the actual banking and whatnot, this one is better than Silverback. Comparing the two POVs, I found the banking a bit better on this one, but then again, this one is 4 meter and that one is not, so there's that.
Yeah, no, I can only agree with that. I think this one is much better.
Yeah, but this one also took longer, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't even remember how long, but I spent, I think I remember somewhere between 8 and 10 hours on this layout, trying to get it right. And even then, there's a lot of places where it's clearly underbanked or overbanked, but it's just one of these cases where, you know, it's 4 meter method. So really getting precisely to the kind of banking where you minimize the lateral G-forces is difficult. And, you know, it's a GCI at the end of the day, so I didn't feel too bad about having some underbanked sections.
Definitely. And of course, Mast took the landscaping and Jaunty took all that to a whole new level, so they made that look really
yeah,
cool.
I really loved it in Silverback as well. The foliage really brought everything together, although it's really insanely dense. I don't know if you want to go quite that dense on this one.
I think I'm going to go more Blue Ridge Mountain, kind of Blue Ridge Mountain Appalachian Trail type landscaping, where it's like a forest, but it's not super dense. So there may be a couple of areas where it's mostly dense, but I also have to keep in mind how the coaster would have been constructed. They would have had to do some kind of land clearing to get up into this hill.
Yeah, for sure, and it's kind of a new generation GCI as well, so I'm sure you'd find some cut trees around the layout.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
So that's another reason why I wanted to go ahead and put this building right here, so that way it gives me an excuse to cut down some trees.
Ah, right.
So
yeah, that's good.
And then right here to the right here on this portion is where the queue is going to go up into the building. So I guess that'll be next. Well, thank you for joining me, and if you stuck around, well, you have some cinematics to look forward to right after this. So yeah, thank you, Sil, for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and for working on this project, for finishing this thing that I left behind a long time ago. I'm glad it's not going to waste, and certainly, on the contrary, you're turning it into something really amazing, so yeah, thank you.
Yep, well, this has been Gambit, and I will see you guys in the next one. Enjoy the cinematics.